All right, and now you should be have opened the middle page to the middle page of your packet because we're going to talk about using the quadratic formula, which sounds ominous, but it's just really a recipe for solving quadratic equations. And I just want to, in the margin here, remind you of now this will be the third strategy for solving quadratics. We have factoring, which we just reviewed, and we have square roots, which was in the warm-up, solving by square roots, and the third is the quadratic formula. Now, I want to tell you that the quadratic formula will work every time, and some of you might choose to choose it every time, but in many cases it is not the most efficient way to solve a quadratic equation. Factoring should always be your first choice. Factoring or square roots should always be your first choice. And then if you cannot factor, then the quadratic formula. But we're going to try some that probably should be done by factoring just to show you how the quadratic formula works. So reminder that the general form of a quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c. So that tells us what the ingredients are. And this quadratic formula right here tells us, is a recipe of what to do with these ingredients to get the answer. So this one is laid out so that A is 2, B is -5, and C is 3. Okay, so A is 2, B is -5, and C is 3. So what we're going to do with that then is, using our recipe up here, we're going to say x equals. Now notice it's a lot like our axis of symmetry formula because it has right here the opposite of b and it has on the bottom 2a. So we're used to that. The opposite of b is +5. And we're going to say plus or minus, and then the square root of b squared. Now I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to write 5 squared there without the negative because I know, and I know that you know, that when you square a negative, in other words, a negative times a negative is always positive. If I write this down as -5, then it increases the chances of you typing in something inappropriate in your calculator. Because if you type -5 squared like this, then you get an answer of -25. And that is not true, at least not true for squaring -5. If you really want to square -5, then you need to put the parentheses in and do it like this. Okay? However, if I count on your intelligence to remind you that whenever you square a negative, it's going to be positive, then just don't write this down as negative, and that will decrease your chances of mistyping your calculator. Okay, so 5 squared minus 4 times a, which is 2, times b, which is, times c, which is 3, and all that over 2 times a, which is 2. All right, once we have everything plugged in there, we have to do some churning and grinding on these numbers to get an answer out of it. What I would do first is do the operation that is under here, 5 squared minus 4 times 2 times 3. So clear that, and I'm going to say 5 squared times 2 times 3. Oh no, I'm sorry. Minus 4 times 2 times 3. And you get 1. So this is the square root of 1, which is easy. And on the bottom I have 2 times 2. which is 4. So this became 4. Now, our two answers, since it's quadratic, it could have two answers. We have 5 plus 1 is one of the answers. 5 plus 1 divided by 4. Or 5 minus 1, because the square root of 1 is 1. 5 minus 1 over 4. So this is 6 over 4, which I can simplify to 3 over 2. And this one is 4 over 4, which is 1. So when you get nice, easy answers like this, that's when it tells you that maybe it would have been easier to just factor that instead of doing the quadratic formula. But we'll move on with practicing the formula. As I said, some of you will like it because it can always get you the answer. Now, this one, we don't have it equal to 0, so unless this is equal to 0, we can't accurately identify A, B, and C. So we'll say x squared minus 6x plus 5 equals 0. So A is 1, B is negative 6, and C is 5. So the opposite of B is positive 6, plus or minus, do the square root. Again, I'm not going to put down the negative for B squared because I know that it's just going to be positive 36 anyway. Minus 4 times 1 times 5. So that's 4AC right there. Underneath, we're going to have 2 times A, which in this case is 1. Okay, so again, we're going to do what's underneath the radical first. And I think I can do this one mentally. This is going to be 36 minus 20. Right? 36, 20. 4 times 5 is 20. So 36 minus 20 is 16. And 2 times 1 is 2 on the bottom. All right, so the square root of 16 is 4. So we're going to have 6 plus 4 over 2, or 6 minus 4 over 2. Okay, 6 plus 4 is 10. Divide that by 2, you get 5. And 6 minus 4 is 2. And 2 divided by 2 is 1. So again, with nice answers like that, oops, you couldn't see that. With nice answers like that, you can see that probably the best plan would have been to factor that. But we're just learning how to use the quadratic formula. Okay, so on this number 3, we will have x equals 2. The opposite of b is positive 1, so the opposite of that is negative 1, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is just going to be 1 squared, and minus 4 times a, which is a half, and times c, which is negative 10. And that whole thing is going to be over 2 times 1/2. All right, so let's do what's under the square root first. See what that is. So let's see, this is going to be 1 times minus 2, because half of 4 is 2, minus 2 times negative 10. So that is, it's going to be 1 plus 20. So negative 1 plus or minus the root of 21 over 1. And when you have 1 on the bottom of a fraction, you don't really need it there. I'm just going to make sure that I did the root of 21 correctly there. So minus 4 times. Okay, I was right. Okay, so actually we can't really simplify this anymore. If this was a word problem and we wanted a better context of what this number is, then we might approximate this by using this calculator to do the square root of 21. But we're not going to do that. Okay, number 4. This one is, b is 2, so the opposite of that is negative 2, plus or minus. And 2 squared minus 4 times 3, negative 3, plus 7 over 2 times negative 3. So under the radical this time, we have 2 squared minus 4 times negative 3 times 7, and that's 88. So the square root of 88 over negative 6. Now 88 I can see has a factor of 4 in it. So I think we're going to have to say that's 4 times 22. So negative 2 plus or minus the root of 4 times the root of 22, and still leave negative 6 on the bottom. But this plane 4, this square root of 4 can become a plane 2. So plus or minus 2 root of 22, negative 6. These 3 all divide by negative 2. So that's going to leave 1 plus or minus 1 root 22, because they all divide by 2, over 3. Okay, by dividing everything there, oops, you couldn't see that, I'm sorry. So 1 plus or minus root of 22 over 3. So we were divided all 3 of these by negative 2. Okay.